Hi, Dan. How's it going?
Good, yourself.
So, you've got 2 extra minutes, and just welcome to the Bidvest IT Forum. You're no stranger to Bidvest. You connect a lot of us into Alice, so thank you. I'm going to just hand over to you.
Okay, great. And is Daryl Scotted? Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. So, and if you want to just give a quick intro there, and then I'll go from there.
Right. Yeah, just as a quick intro, Academy Brushware adopted Flowgear back in 2022, and this has helped us automate CISPRO operations and integrate CISPRO with our third-party vendors quite seamlessly. And it's really been a great addition to our business. I'll let Daniel give his presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. And we'll hear more from you a little bit later as we get into the demo section. Daryl will be able to speak about some of the use cases that Flowgear is being applied for. So I want to just back up as we begin and talk about where we come from and what sort of problems we solve. And fundamentally, if you look at any business going back 10, 15 years, 2 things were different. One was a lot less cloud, and second was that there was generally fewer apps and services in play in a business, and apps were responsible for a wider range of roles. You particularly see this in the ERP. Like today, if you look at something like SAP, even today, like everything gets added into that, and it's all part of SAP. Whereas these days, there's on newer products, there's more emphasis on tools that are much more specialized, and so the likelihood is you have far more apps and services than have ever been the case before. And with an increasing number of them being cloud-based instead of on-prem, you can't get away with the kind of quick hacks to move data around to different places that were maybe possible before. So without a sort of strategic approach in mind, you're going to default to one of these options for moving data across different systems. The first is kind of a swivel chair integration. So if you're running a platform that allows your, say, business customers to place an order or a ticket online, that information needs to then get manually captured into some internal system. So say order placed online in some kind of e-commerce platform, that has to get captured as an invoice manually inside the ERP, for example, CISPRO. Pretty quickly that stops scaling. And so if you're not a tech business, you might have kind of like the lone IT manager who's then responsible for dealing with the integration because there ain't no one else to do it. And so they might cobble together some scripts, get some kind of point integrations up and running. But the trouble can be that those automations exist in multiple different places. There's no cohesive control over them. They're fragmented across different technologies. There's no logging. There's no understanding of the authorization context that those scripts are using to connect into different systems. And so it tends to be extremely brittle. A level beyond that would be a newer entrant. So sort of about like a decade or so back, we saw vendors like Zapier and IFT entering the market. And the idea was that citizen integrators could easily kind of piece together different apps and services. I think there's 2 reasons that perhaps particularly within Bidvest, these are not particularly scalable. One is that you tend to cap out on the level of sophistication of what you can build. So as long as you stay in band with what's been pre-built for those connectors, say for CISPRO and other endpoints, you're okay. But it's very hard, if not impossible, to express nuanced business logic. And then secondly, these being primarily US companies, they tend to have a ton of connectors for that market, and perhaps there are a number of endpoints that you're using in your businesses that you don't have those pre-built connectors for. So it's very difficult to integrate with them. So we'd make the case for using an integration platform like Flowgear, of which there are a number. And so I want to explain where we kind of fit on the continuum. So on this kind of graph, the citizen tools are kind of far to the left on that x-axis. And what we're representing there is these are tools that are very easy to use, but the complexity or sophistication of what you can create is greatly diminished. And there's an inevitable trade-off between those two. Those concepts are in tension with each other. So on the far right-hand extreme, you've got, say, the traditional ESB Certainly you can build anything, but the reason is that you're basically coding, and so hardly high ease of use. So what we've done with Flowgear is try to find the appropriate kind of balance along that graph where you still get visual design, and a lot of the kind of assistive tools, I'll show you some of them in a second, that help you to build quickly and understand how to build integrations without needing to resort to writing software. But at the same time, you're not kind of capped on the sophistication or kind of nuance of what it is that you're able to build. So in summary, Flowgear gives you a single platform that allows you to integrate internal apps and services. But one other thing I haven't mentioned at this point is that it also is a very effective channel for integrating with third parties. For example, if you have data that you receive from vendors, perhaps price sheets, you could receive those via a vendor's API. Maybe they arrive in an email inbox as an attachment, or maybe there's an FTP server you need to pull them from. Any of those modes Flowgear can integrate with. Conversely, on the customer side, so you have a business customer or a partner perhaps, and you need to send information to them, let's say billing information. We offer a number of options around that. You could certainly use our platform to automate delivery of invoices, either as PDFs or raw data, like an Excel document to make it easy for them to ingest. Or a step up from that, you could use Flowgear to create an API that allows your customers or partners to access just their documents in a digital form. Or a step up from that, if your customer doesn't have the necessary skills internally to actually be able to call that API, Flowgear itself can provide that last mile integration. So you're going way beyond just creating an API. You're actually allowing your customer to have a solution that integrates all the way into their product. So for example, you raise a bunch of invoices in SysPro for your customer. You can use the same Flowgear platform to have that customer's, say, SAP install, connect in, retrieve their invoices, and use those to create AP invoices inside their system. So you're kind of able to deal with the entire supply chain in addition to your internal systems. So a big part of the value of the platform is obviously going to be around the connectors that it offers. We have a few hundred today. They're kind of split into two categories. One is some of what you see on screen here. These are what we call product connectors, and then allow you to integrate with pre-built apps and services. So different ERP, CRMs, HR tools, point of sale, WMS, etc. And you can see, for example, SysPro is front and center there. That's a very strong connector for us. And I know it's one that's used quite widely within Bidvest commercial products. And then the other category of product or connector rather, would be the technology connectors. And these are a set of connectors that allow you to deal with open standards and services. So for example, you can connect into many different types of databases. You can engage with file systems to read and write files, FTP, email to parse attachments, and then sort of web calls to talk REST and SOAP and other different API protocols. So the idea is that out the box, you've kind of got a tool set of all of the connectors that are necessary for your use case, and you can assemble those visually into workflows. And we'll get into what that looks like and what it feels like to actually get them built out. But just before that, I'm going to hand back to Daryl just to tell you a little bit about the scenarios that Flowgear is helping to automate within Academy.
Thanks, Daniel. So at Academy, we currently use Flowgear to automate the release of our back orders based on set rules. Simply put, on a daily basis, Flowgear queries our database to check if we've received stock that is on back order. And if stock has been received and put away, Flowgear releases the back orders and flags them for the warehouse management system to import for picking. Another use that we have Flowgear for is we've integrated with our third-party delivery route optimization partner. Every 5 minutes, Flowgear queries our database for sales orders that have been picked and invoiced, and these details are sent through to the vendor in a JSON format. For the second step of that integration, Flowgear monitors for orders that have been scanned to vehicle and manifests have been created. And these manifests are sent through to our vendor. And the vendor then loads these deliveries onto their dashboard instead of someone having to manually capture them. And operator in-house operation and just optimizes the routes and sends the drivers on their way. We have also fully integrated Cispro with our warehouse management system using Flowgear workflows. It's importing of orders for picking, exporting for invoicing, delivery planning, just to name a few, and stock take, etc. One workflow we are busy working on completing is automatic release of sales orders that went into suspense. So instead of waiting for suspense orders to be released to the warehouse manually, Flowgear will monitor for these orders and release them for picking. And we've got some plans this year to improve integrations with our third-party logistics vendors using Flowgear workflows, and quite a few more plans on the way with Flowgear.
Okay. Thanks, Daryl. Appreciate that. So what you're seeing here is a sort of super high-level summary of the Cispro and WMS integration that's already in play. And what I want to walk you through today is kind of a stripped-down version of a bit of a simpler scenario for demo purposes, and that's the backorder release process that Daryl was speaking about just now. So I'm going to walk you through that, but before we go there, I'm going to just create a blank Flowgear workflow and just give you a feel for what it's like to engage with the platform and get it to start, building something useful out. So I'm going to pull up the Flowgear canvas. Okay. And what we're looking at is an empty canvas. So this is the workflow designer where I'll go and define the steps that I have for an integration that I want to build. And what we're going to do is just query some inventory items out of Cispro and then sync them into a database. For argument's sake, this could be a data warehouse. You want to perhaps do some reporting on it. So just to give you a flavor of what it's like to use the platform. So I'll begin by clicking this plus button over here, and that presents me with a list of all of the connectors that are available. We actually have 4 different categories of components that you can add to the canvas. The connectors deal with third-party products. So Cispro is an example of a connector. And then we've got triggers that wait for a condition to be met. You can wait for something to arrive on a queue, an attachment in an incoming email, a file to be created locally or in an FTP server, and so on. Then we've got processors. These will manipulate data. For example, when we need to map data from one form or one shape to another, we're going to use a connector to do that in a moment. And then finally, flow control allow us to make conditional decisions. So, based on the outcome of something, we can choose to go one way or the other. So for our purposes, we're just going to add the Cispro connector to the canvas. I'll select it here. And if you are familiar with Cispro and its business objects under E.NET, as they call it, these parameters map pretty closely to that. But one thing that we allow you to do directly in Flowgear is access samples of all of the different types of interactions that are supported. So for instance, if I go into choose sample here, I get a list of all of the business objects that are available within Cispro. And I'm going to use just a basic search business object for this demo. So it's the confined business object. This allows me to search for records. And if I drill into that, it just gives me some specimen data of what that query needs to look like. And this is what I'm going to work with. I'm just going to strip it down and make it very simple. So I want 5 rows back, and I'm not going to put any conditions or ordering in. And let's just, shouldn't have deleted that. Columns, there we go. So I'm just running a quick query to get data out of the inventory warehouse table. And when we're ready, we can just create this execution flow to tell Flowgear to start and then run the Cispro step immediately. And I'll hit the test button at the top of the screen to have it run. Connection would be good. Let's do that and run it again. And you can see an activity log popped out at the bottom of the screen. So this is showing me what it's doing. Now this is running on a very under-resourced lab environment. So that's going to tick away for a little bit. While it's going, I'm going to add our target connector. So remember, we want to query data out of Cispro and send it into a SQL database. So to do that, I'm going to add another component. And we have a connector called SQL table update, this one over here. I'm going to add that onto the canvas, and this will allow us to do adds or complex updates into a database without worrying about any of the logic of how the SQL statement for that needs to be structured. So while I was doing that, you can see this finished. And if I drill into the response that came back from SysPro, there you can see the first 5 or so stock codes and warehouse combinations that came back. So that's my source data. And now for the SQL table update, what I want to do is understand how to map this to a specific table in the database that I'm working with. And that is going to get done through the table XML property here, which is currently empty. So again, we can go to choose sample, and this is going to actually connect to my database and look at a list of tables that are available. We have an inventory table that we're going to insert into, and if I choose that, it will load the structure of that table onto the canvas. So here I can see an example of some of that data that's sitting in that target table. So it's showing me the structure. So I don't need to flip back between different systems, understanding the schema. It kind of surfaces everything for you. So in the middle here now, I need to translate the data that I got out of SysPro into a form that is appropriate for this database. And to do that, I'm going to add one last component. And this is where we start to manipulate the data using a data mapper called QuickMap. So I'll add that. QuickMap needs to see an example of our source and target data. So the source is SysPro. So I'll plug that flow connector in just like that. And then the target is obviously the table update. And so these lines are showing it how to access that data, and it'll do all of the inference for you. You don't have to explicitly do it. So now when I drill into here, it's giving me 2 trees. Left-hand side is my source, center is the target. And in here, we're just going to do some basic mapping. So I want to map across stock code and inventory, or warehouse ID will do. And I don't actually have a quantity, so I'm just going to hard code quantity field. And notice as I did that, on the right-hand side, it's starting to immediately preview that for me. So you're getting some really low latency feedback, and that's very useful because you can make a large number of changes very quickly. The second thing is that I've just done some really basic mappings here at the moment, but we actually support a whole function language that's equivalent to Microsoft Excel. So let's take some simple examples. If I needed to lowercase the field, for instance, I've got a lower function, just like I'd have in Excel, except instead of referencing a cell, like cell A1, I'm referencing a field instead. So I can just type the field name, tap to complete, close that out. But you'll see the syntax feels very familiar. It's exactly like Excel. And having done that, there's that changed warehouse ID. So that's a very simple example, but you can use it to do different string operations, math, date and time, currency conversion. You can do lookups. So for example, if you've got an e-commerce sync and your SKU in your e-commerce platform is different to your stock code in SysPro, you could do real-time lookups. It handles all of that mapping for you from one place and allows you to iterate on the design very quickly until it's at a point that's appropriately ready. So last stage now is just to connect these flow connectors along the top. That shows Flowgear how to run the steps, typically left to right. And I'm just going to run that. Again, this is just a lab environment, so I think it's going to probably take about 20 seconds to finish up. There we go. So busy with the SQL table update, and over here I can see that it updated 5 rows. So that's just to give you a very sort of quick idea of what it looks like to actually build these solutions out. Let's flip over to the backorder release process. And just in the interest of time, I'm just going to run this, and as it's going, I'm going to explain some concepts. So here what we're doing is running a query on SysPro, similar to the one that I showed you just now for the inventory query, but this is a particular business object that looks at sales orders that are in the lines that are in back order status. So we're getting a list of those. We're iterating through the individual orders. Then we're doing a check to verify whether sufficient stock is available. And if that checks out, we're doing a back order release. And you'll notice that the release is happening here, and we're using QuickMap to construct a request that is the appropriate shape. So if I drill into the release mapping here, you can see exactly what that looks like. So that's an example of QuickMap being used in a more realistic scenario than the simple one I just showed you. And additionally, up front, we have to cluster the back order lines into groups per sales order. So that's the mapping that's taking care of that. So really just simplifies the process. I don't have to resort to any kind of custom coding around this. And we've got quite an involved process, relatively eloquently expressed. So here, as I go down the list, I can see the different steps that executed. And if I needed to, I could sort of interrogate each of those. On the back of this, I've got a report that's being constructed. So we should be able to just take a look at what that's showing us. Let's go into that. So here you can see the items that have just been released from back order. And this report is one that I've just chosen to obtain immediately manually, but it could be something that's emailed out, or it could go via direct message to your Teams or your Slack account as well. And typically these workflows are going to run on an automated basis, so you could choose times of day. But you are also able to invoke these workflows via API. So if the product that you're using can call a webhook, you can actually use that to activate Flowgear in real time. So it's a single platform that's allowing you to visually define and activate these solutions in a multitude of different ways. So we've looked at an example of how we'd go about building a workflow. I've shown you a simple example in the back order release, but integration, much like regular software, also has a life cycle. So we've looked at some like quick prototyping a build, and then we did a test run. Once we're ready with that, we want the ability to ship something into a release. And then it's also important that the platform gives you control over that solution once it's been released. Surfaces issues, allows you to extend it, and that extend then ultimately leads back into a prototyping stage. So I'm just going to talk about 3 components that we have that provide a level of governance around how the platform operates, so that once something is shipped, it still enables you to keep control over it. So if we go back to the workflow design, the first thing you'll notice is that we keep a history of all of the designs of this workflow over time. So I've pulled that version up, and you can see Nick here worked on this demo ahead of today's call. You can see the timestamps that he made those changes. And if we want to, we can drill into exactly what that workflow looked like at an earlier point in time. So there's kind of this immutable audit trail of these changes over time. Then what happens is anything that we're connecting to, we can target different environments. So here we have a test button, and that's the targeting the test environment, but we also have a UAT and a production environment. So for example, if I drill into SysPro, I can open up that connection, see the 3 different environments, and I can have a completely different SysPro company that I'm connecting to for each of those environments. So this gives you a very efficient way to test things across different environments without worrying about whether you copied everything across correctly. And then finally, once something is slipstreamed into production, you don't really want someone to accidentally save something into prod until it's been tested. So you can formalize like this chain of promotion. So here I've got a version of this workflow running in test. When I'm ready, I can appoint a QA team to review the solution, and they will then be able to push those changes into the next environment. Here you can see it's injecting, or it's publishing into the UAT environment. And then once it's in UAT, there'd be perhaps another sign-off, and I can merge that through to production. So just kind of flying through it, but that is how some of the ways that we allow you to like retain control over how solutions remain in play, and you can extend them and change them over time without compromising the robustness and quality of those solutions. So just wrapping up quickly, a couple of other things around our platform. We're huge on security. We have a lot of customers in credit unions and financial services like banks. And so all of the infrastructure that we create for each customer is dedicated. Because that infrastructure is dedicated, there's no noisy neighbor effect with other tenants in the platform, and so we can guarantee capacity. It's not like some of the other kind of lower end tools where you start a request and you kind of get into a queue and you got to kind of wait your turn. All the capacity is dedicated. I've showed you some of the controls that we have, but we also have extensive auditing controls, so you can understand who did what events in the platform were, what are the relationships between different objects. We offer a couple of different deployment methods. So by default, public cloud in Azure in South Africa, but you can also do an on-prem deployment of the platform, and you can also deploy it into your own cloud. So if you're using AWS, for example. And then finally, we carry a SOC 2 Type 2 certification with respect to compliance. Finally, just around our commercial model, many of our competitors price based on CPU cores or number of transactions processed. We don't do that. We work on active workflows. So each plan has a certain number of active workflows that are supported. And the important thing is that you can control how many you're using. So on all plans, you can create any number of workflows, and you can choose to either run all your integrations in parallel, in which case each one of them will use an active workflow slot, or you can chain them one after the other. That means they take longer to complete as a whole, but you could literally have all of your integrations use only one active workflow. And of course, probably what you want is some kind of blend in between. So the point is you get to choose that trade-off between how many active workflows and how long you're okay with them taking to run, which means that you can find a plan that is appropriate for your use cases. So to summarize, visual design, big emphasis on creating a platform that's very easy to use without trading off on the level of sophistication of what you can build. And along with that, our novel commercial model around active workflow pricing, all connectors included on all plans, which means experimenting with new cases, new connectors and scenarios. Doesn't require any financial commitment from you upfront. So that's it for me. If there's any questions, happy to chat. And I think just two things. One is that we do offer a free trial of the platform if you'd like to look at it. Obviously, there's several companies within Bidvest already using it, so we'd be happy to chat to you in more detail around what that looks like. And we also have a proof of concept that we would love to offer you. So let's say you're a CISPRO customer, you have one or two integrations you're interested in, we will actually build out a proof of concept on a complementary basis and present that back to you, that we can show you the workflow designs and see how that would fit for your company. So that's it for me. And Daryl, thanks very much. Appreciate your time as well.
Thank you, Dan. I think a lot of people on this call are very familiar with Flowgear. Unfortunately, we've run out of time in terms of questions, but we will circulate your presentation and your contact details if anyone wants to sign up for the POC or the trial, and also just to let the group know that BAS provides Flowgear professional services. So you could also let us know as well.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Lauren.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
everyone.
much. Thanks for
Cheers.
your time.